right, you're learning about how to solve literal equations. And with this, I do want you to write all your work on a separate piece of paper. Don't try to jam it all in here. Some of them you might be able to do, but I don't want you to have a mix of going back and forth. So we're just going to write it all on another piece of paper. First thing we need to do is we need to define literal equations and what a literal equation is. So on your paper, you're going to define what a literal equation is. And a literal equation is an equation where variables represent known values. So for example, like we'll have equations that deal with distance, time, interest, even slope. So you're going to see a lot of equations on your paper that you might know already what they are, but some of them will be in an introduction, also that you'll see this year or even next year. So pause that, make sure you do have that equation or that definition written down. So we're going to look at our first one. So our first one says P equals IRT, and we want to solve for T. So that's what solve the indicated variable in the parentheses. So we want to get T by itself. Thing is, when you have an equation like this, when you have more than one unknown in one equation, you can't solve for one set number. So we're not going to find like what T equals as a number, but we can set it up to where we can get T by itself. And so looking here, this is IRT. And so what's happening to the T is that it's all multiplication because all the letters right next to each other represent multiplication. So what's the inverse property of multiplication? It's division. So we're going to divide by IR on both sides. And then you're left with P divided by IR equals T. And that would be done because you got T by itself. So if you wanted to find the time and you knew what all these three other pieces of information were, then you could divide the P divided by the IR, which is that's the principal, that's your initial income, and that's your rate, and that's your time. So you'll learn that more next year. So let's look at number 2. So number 2 says P equals 2 times L plus W. Well, does this look familiar? That is the way you can find perimeter of a rectangle. If you knew the length and the width, then the length plus the width, and you can multiply them by 2, so that's a perimeter formula. Now we're solving for W here, so that's why this W in the parentheses. So we want to get W by itself. Well, you can do a couple things here. What I would do, since you have 2 times this entire thing, we want to get the W by itself. Since this 2 is being multiplied by the whole thing, you could distribute it and then divide by 2. What I would do is I would go ahead, this is saying 2 times this. So you can divide by 2 and have P divided by 2 equals L plus W. Now, we still want to get W by itself. So if this was a number or something and we want to get W by itself, we would do what with this number? Well, hopefully you're saying subtraction. So we can subtract this L from both sides. So you're going to have P divided by 2 minus L equals W. And that's how that would look. Okay? So you just have to be careful. Don't put the L with the P on top because you're subtracting L from this entire thing. Okay, so number 3. 3 is y equals 5x minus 6. I'm going to solve for x. You've seen equations already in this format. This is, again, is the slope-intercept format, where 5 is your slope, your negative 6 is your y-intercept. But now we want to solve for x. We want to get x by itself. Okay? So think about if you want to get x by itself. So I look to see that's multiplication and that's subtraction. So I'm going to add 6. Y plus 6 equals 5x. But I still want to get x by myself, so this is multiplication. So I'm going to divide these terms. And you can leave it y plus 6 divided by 5 equals x. And that's as far as you can go. The reason you can't get x equals a number is because you have 2 variables in one equation. When you have 2 different variables in one equation, you can't solve for just one number. So this whole setup here is you're not going to get like x equals 3 or x equals 5. All right? So let's do number 4 together because I can see something with number 4. You have 2x minus 3y equals 8. Now this you will do a lot next year. That you want to get y by itself. Okay, this is actually what we call standard form, and we want to get y by itself. So you can actually get it into slope-intercept form. So I look here, once being done to y, I'm going to move this 2x first, and that's positive, so I'm going to subtract it. Bring everything down, just like you've been doing in your equations. Here's a tip. Start getting that x term first, just because when you start writing in slope-intercept form, it's easier if your x term is first. Now, you have a negative 3 times y. So you want to divide each term by negative 3. Don't divide just one. Okay, my light just went off. They laugh at that every time. Okay, so then this is going to divide. That equals 1. So you have y equals, so a negative and a negative. So you have 2 divided by 3. Do not change that to a decimal. Leave it 2/3 x. Now this is 8 divided by a negative 3. Well, that won't simplify down to a whole number. So you can either leave it minus 8/3 or y equals 2/3 x minus 3 goes into 8 twice, and then you have 2 left over. Do not change this to a 2.6 repeating, okay, because you can't graph that. So this would be your final answer. That one you're going to do quite a bit when you are in Algebra 1. You're going to be solving a lot of these from standard form to putting in slope-intercept form. Okay, so I want you to try the rest. We will be here to help, and then there will be an answer key available to you so you can check your answers, and it'll either be on Mrs. Detlefson or Mr. O'Leary's desk that you can, now all the work's not there, but an answer key will be there just to see if you're getting it right. But you want to show all of your steps. Don't just copy the answer key. That doesn't help you. All right, good luck.